Hello, welcome back to the Power of the People podcast. Today I'm joined by two wonderful human beings, Emma and Vanessa. My name is Mariel Reyes Galvez, and thank you for tuning into another episode where we will be talking about the CLLARO Capital Fellowship Program. Today I'm joined by two of the alumni of that program and recent alumni at that. We have been doing, if you have seen our two previous episodes, you saw that we did one on the history of CLLARO and how the Capital Fellowship Program came to be, and another one on alumni from the very first cohort till now. This is our most recent cohort. So number one, congratulations on making it through the program, because it is not easy. It takes up a huge chunk of your time, and you did it all through a pandemic. That's incredible, and as we've been talking previously, I will always praise you for that. My cohort ended right in 2020, so we only got a taste of what that would be like. And then you all came into what feels like a completely reformed program to cater to all of the virtual needs that we had through COVID. So I know that was a lot of word vomit for an introduction, but if I could have you all, and Emma, will start with you if you don't mind, if I could have you all introduce yourselves with your name, your pronouns, and a little bit about yourself.
So, hi, my name is Emma. I use she, her, aya pronouns. I currently am about to be a senior at Regis University, and I'm studying politics and peace and justice. I'm from Denver. I grew up here, and I made the decision to stay here for school, so that's been very interesting. What else is there about me? I guess I'm first generation American. My parents immigrated here from Chihuahua, Mexico. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you'll learn more about me as we go on, but I don't really know how to introduce myself. So that's that.
That was perfect. You don't have to worry about a thing. Vanessa.
So my name is Vanessa Garcia. I also use she, her, aya pronouns. I am a recent graduate from the University of Denver. So life's been pretty slow recently. I'm just trying to lock down a job so I can move up to Denver. I'm currently in rural Colorado at my parents' house. So switching from the busy life of Denver to the middle of nowhere, Colorado, has been very interesting. But yeah, I hope to continue to do work similar to what we did with CLLARO, working at the Capitol and in public policy. So that's a little bit about me.
And what did you say your major was? You might have said it and I just might not have caught it, but...
Oh, I double majored in socio-legal studies and Spanish.
Okay, sis! Congratulations to both of you. I know I'm currently doing school part-time, and I completely stopped going to school at some point, so props to y'all for pushing through it, because we don't need to talk about that. We'll cut that out. So if you all could talk a little bit about whose offices were you all in, and we'll go in the same order, and what you did there. What did your day-to-day look like?
So I worked in the governor's office, specifically with his policy team and his legislative team. What did I do on the day-to-day? It was I really did everything that they didn't have time to do. I would do it. So I would send emails to legislators, emails to other state departments. And my first week, they had me going through data that we got from federal agencies for a bill that was the data privacy bill. I had to go through the data and help write a memo to the governor about it. So it was kind of weird that my first day they were yeah, just go through this data, and it's how many times has Homeland Security asked for data about a terrorist who's a potential terrorist? And I was just casual, okay, cool. And
some
then
light.
Yeah, some light. And in my last few months, so I stayed on until June. Then June, I helped with the bill signing tour, and basically what that is, I was just a glorified assistant, to say the least. I would help lug around a table, place to place, set up the bill that the governor was going to sign. And that was pretty much it. It like seems a lot more glamorous on like pictures. Like I would post pictures about it on my social media and people would be like, oh my gosh, like that's so cool. And I'm like, the governor doesn't even know my name.
Oh,
I have
no.
never met that man. And like, it's like, I'm still like, even though like I have an important job, I'm still like a civilian in a sort of sense of like
Yeah.
his like state troopers, which is like his security, would like still like treat me like I was some sort of threat. And I was like, you literally have made eye contact with me so many times.
Oh my God.
I promise I'm supposed to be here. So it was just really a weird dynamic of like being in such a high office and like in a way like being important to the function of our government, but at the same time like still being like feeling like a kid, really, is how I felt. I was like, I don't know why I'm here. I feel little and it's intimidating, but I feel like I learned a lot about myself and who I want to be in politics. So that was really interesting. And sorry, that was really long. So I'll pass it on to Vanessa.
That is perfect, girl. This is a podcast. Talk.
Okay.
So that was great. Yeah, it's interesting to see what our first year in the governor's office looks like as CLLARO, because you are our very first CLLARO fellowship fellow intern, whatever we are, in that office. And I had no idea when people initially started talking about it. I had no idea what that was going to look like. And I don't think I was far off in my predictions here after hearing your experience. So that I'm glad you got that experience, but at the same time, I'm questioning whether we need to be in there or not. Vanessa, go ahead.
So my experience was different from Emma's. I was in Senadora Julie Gonzalez's office. So a lot of what I did was really based on what my interests were and what I wanted to, or what skills I wanted to refine. From the beginning of the fellowship, she and her aide Kurt were very transparent and communicated. They were like, "Hey, we're gonna ask you to do this. If none of it interests you, let us know and we'll change it up. We'll go off of what you want to do, so you can really learn and get the most out of the fellowship," which I really appreciated. But from a day to day, I was kind of like Emma. I did a little bit of everything. A lot of the stuff towards the end was more comms related things. So I was making her bill updates for her social media pages, the little graphics. I was emailing constituents, writing up talking points for her to use in committee meetings, stuff like that. It was a lot of writing. I did have a few research projects that I did over the course of the legislative session, but it was more like tracking quotes she had in articles or tracking her bills and seeing which ones died, which ones got passed, things like that. So yeah, I did a little bit of everything.
Well, I'm glad to hear it was a different experience for you. I know Senator Julie Gonzalez is one of the popular ones whenever we do our selections and our meet and greets. So kudos to you for getting picked by her, because I know that's usually how it works. On top of that, you take on a role through this fellowship program of almost being the eyes and ears of your senators, because they are so one track focused on the bills that they do want to pass that there are details that they may or may not miss as they are signing things, as they are voting for things. People don't know that this role, you guys are literally legislative aid number 2 is what it feels like. So with that being said, did you have an idea as to what it is that you were signing up for when you initially signed up to be a CLLARO fellow, and how does that compare to what did happen in your CLLARO fellowship program? Sorry, and we can go the same way, or unless you all want to switch, it doesn't really matter.
For me, so I signed up for the fellowship like relatively, I think it was like the last day I applied. And like it was by a like stroke of luck that I remembered that I wanted to apply to this, because one of my best friends was like, you need to apply to this, like it'd be so good for you. And I was like, okay, yeah. And like it was probably like October, November, I don't know when the deadline was. And I was like, let me Google this. Let's see when the application was due. It was due the next day. I was like, oh my God, I messed up. And
Word!
and
Me too, and now I work here.
I know. Thankfully, Alejandra was like super flexible and was like, yeah, turn things in like when you can. And I went from like working on a campaign. I worked on Hickenlooper's campaign for the Senate. And so I thought it was going to be like a very similar vibe to that, but it was like completely different. It was like a lot more relaxed because like they didn't have a campaign to win. They just had work that needed to be done. And so I kind of knew like what it was like to like work remotely for like a company or like people, an organization. But I will say like my office was like made sure they spoke with me at least once a day. Like we met in Google Meet at least like twice a week. Like I felt like they really wanted to get to know me and wanted to make sure I was like comfortable with what I had to do. What I will say is like the governor is a lot less progressive. He's very moderate, and people think he's very progressive, you know, because he's gay and because he's Jewish. But at the end of the day, he's a businessman. And so I think that was like a really big, like, culture shock in a way of like being like, I don't completely agree with this man all the time about policy, but like, you know, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it in the best of my abilities. And one of my supervisors was one of his policy advisors, and so I'd often like be like, you know, a lot of people have been talking about this bill, and I really think, why does he feel this way about a certain bill? I think it was specifically SB 200. It was one of the climate bills, and I was like, I just don't get why he would possibly like veto this bill. And so it was very interesting to have conversations with people who like were the ones like helping making the decisions about certain bills. And it was also kind of strange because like I would say everyone in the fellowship is very progressive, and so they'd often like poke fun at me and be like, oh, like you're working for the moderate. And I was like, I know it's not my personal opinions, it's just who I work for. So I think that was like the biggest thing I wasn't expecting, is just like working for someone who you don't 100% agree with all the time. It was very interesting.
I'm going to respond to that real quick, and then I'll let you go, Vanessa. That's one of the things about the Capital Fellowship program that I came to understand very much as I went through the program as well, that everything is about exposure. CLLARO's Capital Fellowship program, its purpose in itself is to expose young Latinos to the politics world and create leaders within that world, and at the same time not just expose our students and the people going into this fellowship program, but expose the people who are in office and who are in power to us, because they don't they don't have access to us. They don't live in neighborhoods where they have access to us. Very few do. They don't see us on the day-to-day and don't hear our voices on the day-to-day. They have a million things on their plate. They're very busy, yes. But they also have backgrounds that are extremely different to our own. And many times it's like finding a diamond when you do find someone in power who has a similar experience and upbringing to yours. So, yeah, I feel... I feel where you're at, and where you were at sitting in someone like the governor's office, because I think it's widely known that he's not as progressive as people think he is, and that showed through in his first year in office, and then that makes you question as to where you yourself are at, why you're there, but at the end of the day, you did your job, and that's one of the skills that I praise the CLLARO Capital Fellowship Program. I need to stop calling it that. I'm gonna just call it the CFP. But that's one of the things that I really love about the CFP, is that it exposes you to a extremely different point of view than what you are used to going with or coming up with on your own. Yeah. props to you for being in that office, because Lord knows I wouldn't last a day. I got lucky. I got Senator Robert Rodriguez when I did my internship, and he taught me so much about public policy. He knew that I was the only accounting major in my cohort, therefore, and so he put me in arbitrations a lot. He had me go and see where all of the money movement was and really catered to my experience. And I know it's not like that for every single fellow that we have, but it is interesting to step foot on the other side. Vanessa, go ahead.
So when I was applying, kind of had a similar experience to Emma. I think I put my email in the application wrong. So I heard of it because I have sorority sisters who did the fellowship last year and the year before. And so they sent me the link and I filled it out. I was super excited. And it was around November, one of them asked me like, "Hey, have you heard back?" And I realized that I hadn't. So I emailed Alejandra and she let me know that I never responded to the sign up genius for interviews. And I was like, "What do you mean I never got a link?" And so she was super sweet, like Emma said, super flexible. She gave me a few options to interview. Um, but then after that, when I heard that it was like an internship, I kind of was expecting what like people usually expect from an internship. You're going to be making copies of paperwork, getting coffee for people, like just menial office stuff like that, right? So I was very pleasantly surprised when they were really listening to what my interests were, what my, I guess, sort of areas of expertise were and what skills I wanted to work on. But yeah, it was not what I was expecting at all, but in the best way possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if anything, I was making coffee for myself a lot because I found myself there at very strange hours. I was working at the same time I was going to school part time and was there part time. So I know an intern's life looks very. There's variety in every day. So what did your hours look like? What was that like for you? I know that's one of the biggest questions I received through interviews. I helped Alejandra do interviews at the beginning, and that's one of the biggest questions that we get is, when am I gonna be there? Were you in the capital? Were you at a like different location? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so for me, I did majority of my work in my room. So that was very interesting, and if I remember correctly, I usually like worked in the mornings. So like sometimes I'd like roll out of bed 5 minutes before I was supposed to log on. I'd like it was a struggle from time to time. I mean, it's like even though you don't work like grueling hours, you know, you're only required to work 17 hours. It's like very it's really hard, I would say. Not hard, but like brain-wise, you have to use a lot of your brain for the most part because it's like at least for me, I was like I cannot mess up like and I think that's like a thing to do with like imposter syndrome of like I just need these things to be perfect. And so I feel like I invested a lot of emotional energy in doing this. Um as well as so towards the end, I did actually like get to go into the office or not the office to the Capitol, but mostly for like bill signings or like helping out during things. So like I got to go to the state of the state in February, and that was like really cool because it was like you kind of had to be like invited to go and like you know important people were there. I was actually like sitting behind the girl who like wrote his state of the state, the speech that he gives about, you know, how the state is doing. And I remember she had like a hard copy of the speech and I was like, "Why does she have a hard copy? Like where'd she get that?" And then everyone was like congratulating her and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this person is important and like wrote it." And I felt kind of dumb. Um but it was like cool. She actually graduated from Regis, so it was I don't know, it was kind of like affirming that like I'm in the right place. Um, but all that to say, I did mostly remote work And the hours weren't long, but they were long in the sense of like, it's a lot of emotional energy to do this sometimes.
So for me, DU works on a quarter system, so I switched my schedule, I think, twice or three times during the fellowship. So the first half of it, I would work Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays because the rest of my time, my classes were stacked. So Monday, Wednesday, I had class like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Um, so Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would go into the office and literally be there like 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. I was there for like 8 hours straight. And like Emma said, it wasn't like hard work. Like I enjoyed it and it like time went by fast, but it was just the same thing, imposter syndrome. I would go over the same thing over and over to the point that I would get like headaches from looking at the same sentence, you know what I mean? And so after I think in April is when I switched my classes again, and then that one was a bit easier. It was pretty spaced out. It was like 4 hours a day, so it wasn't too terrible. But yeah, it was just the same. Like how Emma said, it's a lot of emotional and like mental like effort that you put into it. Um, so it wasn't anything crazy, but definitely like the hardest thing I've done so far.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want our audience to forget that, again, you all did it through a pandemic, like quite literally through. So your onboarding was at the end of 2020-ish, and then you started in February, right? So everything was still extremely remote, from what I know. And I know some things are still remote, capital-wise and policy-wise. Surprisingly, that's one of the areas in our state that still hasn't gone to be fully open, and it makes me question a few things, but we don't need to get into that in this episode because Lord knows I could go on about that forever. So, with that being said, what has been your biggest takeaway from this experience? I know we've talked about hours, we've talked about what you expected versus what you got, but it's over now. You graduated, you had your little event that I have recorded somewhere that I cannot wait to stitch to this conversation. So what came of it? What now? What's next?
So I think I kind of mentioned it earlier. I realized like how much I care about like humans and like how much empathy I have for people. And I think that's why this was so emotionally draining because at times it felt like we were forgetting like these are like humans who we're talking about. Like this policy will affect millions of people in our state. And so I realized that like I do not want to lose my humanity. Like I don't want to stop being human just to like work in politics and like turning off my emotions. And kind of like a story that really like solidified this for me. And it's kind of sad. So just like preparing you emotionally. So in March is when the Boulder shooting happened. Um, and it really hit me hard because I was like, Boulder, like, you know, that's only a few miles away. Like, I almost went to school there, and like King Soopers, everyone goes to King Soopers. And it wasn't until the mugshot came out of like the guy who did it, and I was like, Jesus Christ, he went to my high school my freshman year. Like I have walked the same hallways as this man. Like I know this person. And that like hit me hard in a way that like I don't know, it's like chilling to think about. Um and so I think one of my last bill signings was for the Special Olympics license plate, and we signed that at a mental health place in Boulder. And so they had the parents of one of the victims of the Boulder shooting come. I believe her name was Terry, and she was a Special Olympian. And so they like spoke about her, and like it was just like it was too much for me, and I was like crying, and I was trying to like keep it together because you know I was working or whatever, but I was like I like could not, and it was just like you know you think about like all the policy that like could have kept that from happening, and like you also think of like just like how many humans are affected by this. And not to go into like specifics, but like when we were packing up, it kind of felt like these people were like, it was more of a like, how do we deal with these people rather than like, how do we care for these people, like the parents of this victim. And I was just like kind of pissed off. I was like, do you not get it? And like, I don't really want to expose anyone in saying all of this, but it was just kind of like, I'm in politics because I care about people, not because like I want to feel important or entitled to something, and I feel like I really learned like how politics works through that experience of like, for some people, like it's simply, you want to do well in life and you want to, you know, feel like you're powerful or whatever. And like, just like, I don't know, feel important. And like for me, like, yes, I'm a Leo, so I want to feel important, but like, um, for me, like politics is about like making life better for people and like reducing as much harm as I can. So for me, it was just like a huge, like, what am I doing here sort of thing of like, I don't know if I can like be a cold person who doesn't care about people, and thinks of them as like more of like a PR thing than a human. And so for me, like I said, it's just like it was kind of like this realization of like, how am I going to do this for as a profession, and like keep my sanity. So yeah, that was kind of a long story short. I don't know. I just realized I'm a very empathetic person and like I care about humans. So yeah.
And thank you for sharing your experience. I was reading this thing the other day about the 6 degree of separation, how every person is about 6 people away from you, at least in places where we have as close proximity as Colorado, where our towns are small, our cities are small. So that can be a very scary thing to think about. So props to you for doing it. Props to you for still showing up, because it's not easy. And I think we need more empathetic people in politics. Just saying. I would much rather have someone who is sitting in their office thinking about who I am as a human being rather than who I am as a number, because then they're not really thinking about me. Vanessa, go ahead.
Yeah, I think similar to Emma, one of the main takeaways was realizing the frustration that I felt from the same way that people were treated like numbers. We weren't really seeing the human side of things. And so just really learning the same, how compassionate I am about people, but then also learning that that same compassion that I have for people, I need to have for myself. Because if I don't have, if I'm not treating myself in a gentle, kind way, like overworking myself, not taking breaks, checking in with myself how I'm doing, I can't help these people. And it's just going to be more people that are treating them like numbers. And so just really fighting that fight, but also recognizing when to kind of slow down, because if you fight it to the fullest the whole way, you're not going to make it. Yeah.
And the thing is, the fight is always going to be there. Whether we like to think about it or not, and sometimes it makes me very sad. But the fight is always going to be there because there is so much work to do. And on so many occasions we think, I can fix this, I can do this if we just pass this bill, if we just make this a law, and that's not the way that the world works. Unfortunately, that's not the way that our democracy works. There's so much work that goes into passing a bill or a law or even just bringing something to somebody's desk. And that's why our presence in the Capitol and in policy is so important, because it exposes them to us, to our needs, and the demands that we have for our state politics. And that's really what it is, right? I cannot imagine what it's like to work in national politics as compared to this, what feels like a micro experience within it. And even then, this micro experience feels like a giant. I'm happy to hear that you're both striving to take care of yourselves. That is also one of the things we are trying really hard to promote with the Capital Fellowship program. Is how do you find that work-life balance, especially within politics? Moving forward, I hope you all take these experiences with you in your heart as you move on to whatever it is that you are moving on to. Because again, we need people who know the back end stuff. We need people who know how policy and politics work. We need people who are we need POC in these spaces, people who have the experiences and the backgrounds that we do as Latinos. And it's heartbreaking to know that as far as we've come, again, there's still so much work to do. In our lifetime, we might not see drastic change, but I know that we can change things because we have some very brilliant minds, especially the minds that come through this program, influencing and shedding a light on important issues to them, to our senators, to our legislators. So yeah. What advice would you all give someone who wants to apply for the Capital Fellowship program or is looking to apply to the Capital Fellowship program?
That's a hard, not a hard question, but
I'm sorry.
that's like
sorry.
a toughie. I think
I'm glad it's hard. I'm glad.
well, I guess like advice-wise, I would say I think something that really helped me was being confident in who I am going into the interview, of like not kind of having this mentality of like, you need me, like I should be here, I'm meant to be here, and like just being assured and like everything that you've done has led you to this moment. As well as like I would say like once you're in the program, like don't be afraid to mess up. Like you're gonna look stupid even when you don't try to look stupid. It just happens. We're humans, and like don't be so hard on yourself. Really, it's like we all mess up. We're all humans at the end of the day. As well as like sometimes you just have to be honest with your supervisors or your coworkers or whoever it is, of like, either this is how I feel, therefore I don't have the capacity to do what you're asking me to do, or B, I don't know what I'm doing, or C, I just, this topic doesn't really interest me, and so I'm gonna try to do this work, but I don't know if it's gonna be great. So just like transparency and vulnerability can like get you a long way, which is weird to say in politics, but it's honestly what helped me. I would say like my mentors were like some of the people that like helped me the most during this time, because it was just so like, and so many awful things happened in this past 6 months that like being able to like be comfortable enough to like tell my supervisors what was going on really helped me. And I would say like for the most part, like all the mentors like care for you and like want you to succeed. So yeah, transparency will get you a long way.
That was a lot of good advice, Emma. A lot of it was what I was gonna say, so let me think. I think.
Why'd you have to steal her ideas? Come on.
No, it's okay. It was all so good, and very well put, I will say. I think for me, something that really helped me was, um, I always say this, like in anything I do, fake it till you make it. If you feel like imposter syndrome was a huge thing for me, but I was like, you know what? Like, just act like you know what you're doing. I have never worked in politics before this fellowship, but Aid would be like, "Do you know what this is?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Didn't know what I was doing. Had no idea. I would just look it up and I was like, "You know what? We're just gonna go with it. We're gonna roll with it. I know I have the skills to do it. Whatever happens, happens." Like, just trust the process. Um, and I think another thing too is like be like how Emma said, it's okay to be transparent and vulnerable, but also when people do the same in return, really take it and appreciate it for what it's worth, because you're not always going to get it in return. And having that mutual like communication and trust to be vulnerable is very valuable. Um, so take it, like she said, like mentors are super important. Like I would consider my senator now a mentor, because I was lucky enough to be in the office pretty often, that I have that communication where I'm like, hey, like this is a work thing that I'm doing, but can I talk to you about something that's not necessarily work related? So really valuing the connections and the relationships that you make is super, super important.
Yeah. You got to partner with somebody who is on the Latino caucus. So that is super exciting to know that partnership, because CLLARO directly partners with the Latino caucus of the state. And it's just such a beautiful thing to watch Latinos mentor other Latinos who are upcoming in their professional life. I feel like I've only hit the peak, like just barely hitting the peak of the iceberg in my career, and I am exposed to a variety of people that have been doing this since the 60s and 70s, and my mind is just completely blown every time I walk into the CLLARO office, every time that I think back on my experience with the Capital Fellowship program. So yeah, it's a remarkable thing to go through, and at the same time something that is very emotionally draining. Can we go back very quickly to, we keep throwing around this language of imposter syndrome. Do either of you want to explain what that is, so that people listening know what that is? Because I know all three of us in this room know what it is, because we go through it all the time, especially as young Latina women who are breaking ground in these spaces. I can describe it if you guys want to. Imposter syndrome really is when you are doing something or you are occupying a space where you feel like you don't belong. That's why it's called imposter syndrome, because you feel like among everyone in the room you are not worthy of being there. You don't have enough experience to be there. You don't have enough of something to occupy the space that you are occupying. And many times, at least for me, I was oftentimes the only brown face in a room. That itself can be extremely intimidating, to have a different last name, to have a name that people can't pronounce. So I told this story at one of our CPF Friday meetings, or CFP Friday meetings, where when I was younger, I learned from my mom, the minute I entered kindergarten, to pronounce my name Marielle. That's my name. Where my entire life I was called Mariel, and suddenly at 5 years old I'm being told to change my name, and that's what I thought it was. I was changing my name, and my mom's like, no, you're not changing your name. You're just pronouncing it differently, because your teacher, who is a white woman, will not be able to pronounce your name. And that is where the first level of whitewashing and imposter syndrome started. Literally, I keep telling people, everything goes back to childhood. All of the issues, all of the trauma, back to elementary school. You gotta go in there, explore what happened in your childhood, and then come back to your problems in real life, and then you can address them. Again, completely different episode, and we could talk about that too, but not today. So yeah, ever since then, any space that was an academic space, any space that was a political and policy space, I was Marielle, and Marielle was doing the work, and Marielle was the one who people didn't expect to show up when I did show up, because Marielle sounds very white. And then you have this 5'2" brown, loud ass Latina with big eyeliner coming in like, hey, you all are doing this wrong. So that can be very intimidating. I am very much an extrovert, and I am very much a Taurus, so I will say what I want when I want it. And that then I learned about the loud brown woman stereotype that I was categorized as. You hear my name, Marielle Reyes, and I come in and I'm actually a completely different thing than what you were expecting. Again, luckily I, through the Capital Fellowship program, fell in love with both the program, politics, and CLLARO. I fell in love with my Latinidad and what I have to offer just by existing, just by occupying the space that I was occupying. I have Senator Robert Rodriguez to attest to that fully, because he would throw these curveball questions at me as to why are you here and why do Latinos matter so much. And like, he just tested me on a completely different level than I have ever been tested before. And again, that Taurus energy, I don't like to be tested. So he was really pushing my buttons as I was going through that. And everything that he did was criminal justice policy, which was another area that like really got me heated. So it's, I don't know if you all, and I didn't hear you nod. I saw you nod through the screen, and agreeing with some of the things that I was saying. Do you have any thoughts on that? And could you go deeper into what your imposter syndrome was like? I know we touched on it briefly, but I think that's a really important point to grasp onto right now, because that's how a lot of young Latinos and allies who are not who are people of color who come through this program as well, because this program doesn't only cater to Latino young men and women, it also caters to allies who are going through this program who are POC. And in politics, I hear a lot of my peers say, well, I don't care about politics because nobody looks like me anyway, nobody talks like me anyway, people don't come from the same background as I do, they would never understand. I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
I'm kind of thinking out loud here. But very similar to you, I like whitewashed myself as much as I could when I was a kid, because like that's what I did to survive. I was, made fun of for my last name. They're like, well, how do you even pronounce that? Blah 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 blah. I barely knew how to spell it when I was like 5. And I remember one time, this is very off track, but one time the lunch lady, they had to look me up in the system. She was like, how do you spell your last name? And in my head, I was like, how? Menchaca Chavez. I don't even know how to spell it, ma'am. Like, I don't know what you expect me to do. And like, I remember in that moment feeling so much like shame. First of all, because I couldn't fucking spell. Sorry for being explicit.
No, you're good.
Second of all, because like, it's like, why do you not know how to spell my last name? Like, it's my name. And I would often have teachers call me Emma Chavez, and I'd be like, that's not my name. Like, it's hyphenated for a reason. It's one thing. And just like, I don't know, like being from like in high school, being very empowered, going to a very diverse high school, being in young African American and Latinx leaders with that's how I met you, Mariel. And like being empowered of like, you're a person of color, brown power, all this shit. And then going into a space into an office where you're the only person of color, you're like, what is this? Like, where am I? And often, I don't know, like certain things, like I think when you're a person of color, you clock a lot of things that white people do. And you just kind of like reflect on it because you don't really have anyone else to like talk about it with. And that's where I felt my imposter syndrome come in of like, am I making this up? Am I being ridiculous? Was that a microaggression, or am I just being sensitive or soft? I think that's my biggest thing is like, I don't want to come off as sensitive or soft or like dramatic. But sometimes
Right.
you have to be dramatic because like that's your experience. And if your emotions get hurt, they got hurt, and you should be able to voice that. And I'd often have conversations, especially with my white male mentor, and like check him on certain things and be like, why do you say that? Why do you think that? And like being comfortable enough to have those conversations was like a privilege, I will say. But all that to say, I don't know what I just said. I said a lot of things. But
All great things, all good things.
imposter syndrome, I think, manifests itself in so many different ways that it's like not one unique experience, and we can feel like an imposter in like so many realms and so many things, and because of so many identities, I think, especially as women, and like it's politics is so male dominated that it's kind of ridiculous. And that's
yeah, it's extremely
that's
ridiculous.
a whole
It is.
different
It's
episode.
actually ridiculous.
But I don't know, like having conversations with men and like, you know, knowing how to assert your power without like seeming bossy or whatever it may be. I don't know, it's hard.
Fuck that.
Period.
We're just being assertive. We know exactly what we want. We have a fire sign. We have an earth sign. We're just cracking down on the microaggressions, because microaggressions can not only happen racially, it can happen through gender and through like it's such a deep thing. And like you were saying, yeah, that's a completely different episode, but I completely get it. You have anything else to add to that? Okay, Vanessa.
So funny that you say earth sign and water sign, or fire sign, because I'm a water sign. I'm a Scorpio, so I tend to be very aggressive, but I'm a crybaby about everything. So with imposter syndrome, like Emma was saying, like I'm like, is that a microaggression, or am I just being very, very aggressive right now? And then I would think about it, and then I would cry, because I'm like, why did that upset me so much, and why didn't I say anything, you know? But I think for me, imposter syndrome really started. So I grew up in a really white area. My parents, from like the minute that we started like looking for schools for my siblings and I to go to, they're like, we're taking them to the suburbs. They're not growing up, and like we lived in the ghetto, you know, at Colorado Springs. So they were like, we're moving to a suburb. They're going to the white kids school. So I never really questioned the fact that I was a woman of color until I think my senior year of high school, when I applied to DU, and someone word for word told me, "Oh, you got into DU because you're one of the smart ones." And I was like, "What is that supposed to mean?" And they're like, "You're a smart Mexican." And I was like, "Why can't I just be a smart period? You like, why can't I just be smart?" And then someone else told me, they're like, "Yeah, affirmative action, all this, and that." And I'm like, "So I'm just getting in because I'm brown," is what you all are telling me. So I went through my whole undergrad thinking that, and even though like CLLARO was like is specifically made for us, people of color, I still went into it kind of with that same mentality of like, oh, I'm just here because I got lucky, or I'm just here because I'm brown, which to some extent, yes, it's catered towards us, but that's not the reason.
Yeah, but like 100 other brown people also applied to this and you got in. So that's a little validating, Once you really think about it, you're like, wait.
No, yeah, exactly. So I think it's just, like Eva said, it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And it's just super frustrating because even in my office, I was in the Senate majority office. And besides the senadora and myself, there were all white people. And it was female majority, but they were white women, which is different. Their experiences are different. Even the way that they talked, I was just like Emma said, why are you saying that? Like, why are you thinking the way that you think? You know what I mean? And it's like they weren't bad people. It was just like they just couldn't relate either. So which was at times frustrating to me when I was in the main area of the office. So it was where all the aides desks were. So the senators would come out to talk to their aides, or people would come in and talk to the aides, and I got to listen to the conversations. And it wasn't that they were bad people, but I was like, this is a little sus. I'm like, I don't like how you're talking right now. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience. But yeah, I just rambled. Sorry.
You're good. Don't apologize. Don't do that. We do not do that in this house. Not in the Power to the People house. Please don't apologize for your experiences. That to the T is like everyday life as a Latina woman in white spaces. Every single day, especially if you do this work. That's why I wanted to latch on to that bit of information from y'all, because what y'all gave me was just like juice right now. It's just all the sauce. That's exactly what I want out of this. I was like, all right, we're done with all the hippy dippity. How was CLLARO and how did you like it? To like, this is what I want, and these are the type of experiences and stories that I'm hoping to pull out of people, because this is what's real. Going into the Capital Fellowship program is a chore. It is an experience that will make you question your mind, your body, and your soul. You have these crazy hours. You have this crazy schedule. You have a million things to take on. And you come out of it a completely different person. I feel like you do. Because not only were you questioning, but a lot of your experiences are now valid because you have seen them as you have grown up. Again, that thing about everything going back to childhood. You have seen them growing up, and now you see them in your workplace. This is real life. These experiences that we have been talking about, Emma, since Espo and y'all, these experiences that we have been shining a light on since we have been in high school, they are real. This program itself is so validating in so many different ways. Not just validating positively that you belong in your career, that you are good at your job, that you are, doing the damn thing and getting that degree, but that your existence itself is a form of resistance. Once you step foot into these places, you're already making a change. Because again, it's that thing about exposure. Some people didn't go to a school with brown kids at all, have never worked in a space with brown people ever, and now are getting to do that. And we have a chance to check them and correct them and remind them of our existence, that we are not all meant to be clustered and clumped in one place. Although it's great, right? To go into those Friday meetings and be like, these are my people. Like, I'm finally around some other brown spaces or some other brown people in a brown space where we can all just be brown together and talk about, what is this like for you? Like, are you also struggling? Because I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Yeah, that's what it felt like for me. The Fridays, I know yours were virtual, so I don't think they were quite the same as ours were, but I hope you know that you have a network now. One of the things that I am really trying to push with Alejandra is alumni engagement. I don't want your connection to other wonderful, intelligent, brown faces and minds to end at just those Friday meetings, to end at just that graduation. I want that to go on so that you have a network of people who look like you, talk like you, have similar experiences to you in your career. Not just in your career, but in your lifetime. Rather than just a program, the Capital Fellowship program is a network. It's a network of people who are willing to listen to you because they've been there. That was my little plug for CFP, but and what's to come of CFP in the future. Your cohort taught us as CLLARO a lot about what we need to be doing for our fellows, what we need to be providing, and how to go about this in the near future. Because again, it's our biggest program. It's our biggest program. It's the one thing that CLLARO is known for, but there's still so much work to do. And that's not invalidating any of the wonderful work that Alejandra does. She has done so much for this program and has made it rise to a level that I will never comprehend. Props to that woman. So I want to close out with, just because I want to be sensitive to your guys' time as well. If there was something that you could change or wish you would have had provided through CLLARO for the Capital Fellowship program, what would it be and why? And you don't have to answer right away. Take your time. If any funders are listening to this part, listen well. This is the moment to listen to, because you get to hear from the very people who go through it. And then they go through it, sis. They go through it. What it is that this program is missing. So please.
Okay, I'll start off. And the first part, I mean, we couldn't really control. We were in a panoramic, there wasn't much we could do. But I really wish I could have spent more time in person with y'all. Because I feel like I didn't know anyone until like 3 months in. And that's because we like scheduled something and only 3 of us showed up. We all showed up to 3 of us to a dinner. We had fun though. I had a great time. I made some good friends. But like I don't know, just like being able to like learn about each other in a sense that isn't just like work. Like I want to hear your traumas. I think that's interesting. I want to relate to you. That also requires a different sort of vulnerability. So but I don't know, just like getting to know each other beyond work because we're like so much more than like the work that we do. And second, I would love to see us in offices that aren't just like part of the Latino caucus. Like I feel like, we would really like excuse my language, but fuck shit up if we were in like all the offices, because like we have so much to give and like we could change so much if we were everywhere. It's like we talked about, like if we were everywhere, things would be so much better. But yeah, I just wish like, we were in the offices of Black legislators, of white legislators, that would be really cool. And like, I don't know, really, I think we could really change kind of the culture at the Capitol because it's so white. Like walking, like in my office, it was me and like 5 other white men, and it was like, what am I doing here? But yeah. Also, but with that, sorry, Vanessa like apologized earlier for rambling, and I was like, all my answers were rambles. Please don't apologize. I love to ramble. But I think as well as like getting a little bit more like emotional support, because like yes, like ooh, great to be in these white spaces, but being in these white spaces is like exhausting. So like getting a little emotional support, a little mental health check-in, you know, maybe guiding us to some therapists would be beautiful. And yeah, that's all I got.
And again, I hope funders are listening. I'm gonna call y'all out because I know y'all are gonna listen to this. Because number one, everybody wants a CLLARO fellow. Again, our program is very popular. I know the power we hold. But not everybody's willing to pay our CLLARO interns. And our CLLARO interns do not do this for free. I would not let y'all do this for free. At all. Therefore, I will keep that promise going forward. So I hope funders are listening. Because we need resources to not only pay our interns for the immense amount of work that they have to do and that they do with their entire hearts and souls, and that they humanize this work for us to a level that we will never understand. And I would love to provide those resources, not only for you all who have gone through the program, going through the program, and our alumni. Because again, it is very hard to be a brown person in majority white spaces. It is very hard to be the only woman in a male-dominated space. It is very hard to be a brown woman in white male-dominated spaces. Anyway, Vanessa, go ahead.
When I heard your question, I kind of freaked out a little bit because I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's missing from it. I think similar to what Emma
We're
said,
perfect. We can go home. You heard it here. Goodbye. We're wonderful. It's great. It's perfect. Nothing needs to change.
Oh my God, that was funny. I think at least for me, a big component that I was missing was, like Emma said, that emotional check-in. Because you touched on it earlier a little bit that y'all's Friday sessions were where you kind of came together and you're like, okay, these are my people, they understand what I'm going through. But I mean, again, not y'all's fault, out of our control. We were in the middle of a pandemic, but it felt like our virtual Friday sessions were just sit on Zoom for 3 hours with a professional talk because we all knew we weren't fully dressed professionally. You know what I mean? Just sit there, mic off, watching your computer, and that was it. And don't get me wrong, the speakers we had were awesome. Like, I learned a lot from them, but at the same time, it was like, I feel like I'm in a 3-hour lecture. Like, I'm not getting to know the fellows. I'm not we did have our weekly check-ins like as fellows, but because of time, it was no more than like a minute each. You know, it was just kind of like, what'd you do that week? How are you feeling? Move on, kind of thing. Which, I mean, I appreciate those check-ins, but at the same time, it was like, I sent an email, things are going great. Like, there wasn't a lot of substance there that I feel like I was missing, um, in terms of getting to relate to other fellows and really feeling like the work that I was doing had more of an impact than just sending an email, I guess you could say. Um, so yeah, I think for me the most important thing is, or something that could improve from it, is having those fellow get-togethers that are not always CLLARO work focused. Like kind of like, I think we did this towards the end of the fellowship. One of our Friday sessions, we took a picture and we kind of just sat and talked. That was it. And that was like the most fun I had the whole session with the whole cohort, because it was like these people are not just like the governor's office is fellow. I don't remember the reps. They're all blinking right now. I like forgot. But you know what I mean? Like they were not fellows. They were people. They were my friends. They were my little CLLARO friends, you know? So that was something that I definitely think needs to be incorporated more.
It both makes me so happy to hear that and breaks my heart at the same time, because a lot of things that you all are talking about, I got through my experience just being there in person. Again, I am so sorry. I like apology from the universe to both of you to miss out on that juiciness that this program provides, because be real with y'all, I still have a Snapchat group with my cohort and like we talk shit all the time. And it's great. And you all were missing that closeness, and it breaks my heart, because that is probably the best part of this program. That is like the meat of this program, is that you get to connect with other young people who look and talk like you and have similar experiences to you and are having similar experiences to you because of the place that you are occupying in the capital, in and out of the capital. Because even some of my cohort members who weren't working in the capital, I was really close to, because I saw them on the floor occasionally, because I passed them by, because I got their Snapchat, and we would talk about work or whenever an incident happened. So yeah, I'm not bragging to y'all either. I don't want y'all to think that, but like, it hurts my heart that you all didn't get that experience, but you still came out on the other side, and that in itself is remarkable. I hope in the future I can also do more cohort reunions in person. We are hosting an alumni event here soon, that Alejandra sent via email. So if you all would check your emails and make sure that you are registered for that, I would love to meet both of you in person. If you're not comfortable doing so, I think I'm going to try to get together different cohort reunions as well as virtual alumni events, since I know a lot of our alumni have gone on to do amazing things in DC and other states that need a lot of help as much as we do. So any closing remarks before I do our little outro and we wrap up here? Okay. Well, man, just gratitude every time I finish one of these episodes. I leave with a sense of purpose every time I wrap up an episode like this, because aside from all the promotional stuff and what did you think and how did it go and what did you do, it's this raw realness that I hope people like our funders, people like our viewers, people who just follow in general get to hear, because this is real life. This isn't the pretty poster child that we are used to being. CLLARO is never going to do that to you all. We're not going to tokenize you, and we are actually going to uplift your voices and your power through the work that we do. So that's what Latinos deserve. That's what young Latinos deserve. So if you all ever need anything, just know that the connection has been made here. I enjoy both of your presence equally together and separately so much. So I hope you all are ready for me to reach out more and be like, hey, I have this topic that I think you would really vibe with. Do you want to do an episode with me? Because this is the realness of the world. This is it right here. I hope that becomes very clear and apparent as I keep doing more of these and as I bring you guys back, if you are willing. Other than that, thank you so much for watching Power to the People podcast. My name is Mariel Reyes Galvez, and we'll see you in the next one.